Hi guys, I'm Amy. Welcome to my podcast, Spill the Teeth, where I spill the tea on all things dentistry and a bunch of other fun things. Welcome to episode 12. Guys, I apologize for the long hiatus between episodes. I've been very busy, as I'll get into talking about this episode, but if you lost track of time, as I did, we are on week 5 of the summer semester of D3 year. I'm actually now halfway through my summer semester of D3, so soon I'll be going into finals and the fun that brings, obvious sarcasm, and then I will be going on to my 3-week summer break. So, as always, let's begin with talking about what I did this past week. I'm not really going to go over the past how many weeks that I missed because it's probably all the same. Usually I do the same things week in, week out. But anyway, me and my classmates have started in clinic. I have not started seeing patients yet. I was on my radiology rotation, my first week of clinic, so I was back in radiology. And then this week I had no patients scheduled, and I was finishing up my radiology rotation. So in dentures, complete dentures 2, we are working on an immediate denture setup. So that entails setting the posterior teeth, and I'm currently setting the posterior teeth. Well, I have set the posterior teeth. I'm working on getting them into a lingualized occlusion, and if for everyone who doesn't know what that is, lingualized occlusion is when only the lingual cusps, so the cusps on the maxillary teeth that are towards the lingual or palatal in that case, are the only things contacting the mandibular teeth. And that has been its own set of challenges. I had to set the mandibular teeth and then set the maxillary teeth one time before, and then the lingualized occlusion for the first time didn't matter so much, but then we took out the anterior teeth of the cast and had to set the maxillary teeth the second time, now into lingualized occlusion. My other lab class is implants, and in implants we are working on an open tray impression. That's been its own set of challenges too, because I've been trying to pour up a cast from a PVS impression, and the moulage, or the material that is supposed to mimic the gingiva in the stone cast, keeps sticking to the PVS. So that's been its own set of challenges, but I have the material, so I plan on working on that this weekend. My other classes are, I think, all didactic. I can't really keep track of all the classes, and I'm not even in that many classes this summer, but all the rest of the classes are didactic, so that means taking notes, paying attention in class, making Quizlets, the like. In clinic, like I talked about, I am not currently seeing patients. I actually start seeing patients next week, so by the time this episode comes out, I'll be in the week that I'll be seeing patients. So I'm recording this on a Friday, and next week, I will be seeing my first set of patients. So that is nerve-wracking and exciting, but other than that, I've been in radiology rotation, which I actually don't mind. It's a lot of taking full mouth series and panoramics, which is interesting because it's very different on a real person, obviously, because real people have different anatomical variations, whereas the mannequins that we practice on, we kind of got used to their anatomy, and, they didn't have tori, they didn't talk, they didn't have saliva, they barely had a tongue. If they had a tongue, it was usually like folded out of the way. So it was very different doing it on a mannequin versus a person. And for that, you would think that we get started in clinic, just they nudge us out of the nest, if we're using an analogy of baby birds and stuff. But no, when you're back in at least radiology rotation, and I'm sure in clinic as well, it's kind of like they just drop kick you out of the nest, and then there's a cliff, and then there's fire at the very bottom. So that's kind of what it feels like. But I guess that's a good way to learn, just floundering around by yourself. But I do wish there was a little bit more guidance, especially with Axiom. If you don't know about Axiom, Axiom is the bane of the existence, of anyone's existence. It is the software that my school, and I think a bunch of other dental schools at least, use to chart patient records and whatnot. But it is not user-friendly, and I have yet to figure it out very well. I've only started really figuring it out, and we had training for like the last 2 years, but obviously it went in one ear and out the other. So that is all the stuff that's been happening at the school side of things. Now we're going to move into the hot and not. So for the hot, I guess this applies for the past couple of weeks too, because I went home a couple of weeks ago because my sister got married, and then this past weekend I flew to North Dakota because my best friend was getting married. So those are the hots for this past week and the past couple of weeks, that I got to go home and see my sister get married, and then I got to fly to North Dakota and see my best friend get married. The not is kind of related to that because I flew to North Dakota, and where I'm at, I had to fly out of St. Louis, and then there was a layover in Minnesota, and then I flew from Minnesota to Fargo, North Dakota. And the not is that I had a pretty lengthy layover in Minnesota coming back from Fargo. So on the way back as well, from Fargo, I went to Minnesota, and then Minnesota, I went to St. Louis, and the Minnesota layover was very long. The flight was delayed, so it was going to be a long layover anyway. I think it was like 3 or 4 hours, but then the flight got delayed, so I was there until, I think the plane didn't fly until 11:30 at night. And I could have taken another flight. There was another flight earlier that went from Minnesota to Georgia and then to St. Louis. I didn't really want to fly to Georgia, and then there was a really short layover / connection that I didn't know if I'd be able to get. I didn't know how big the Georgia airport was, but the Minnesota one was very big. It took very long to get to where I needed to go, so I didn't want to be late or anything, so I just had a really long layover in Minnesota, which was fine because I had dinner, I got Wendy's at the airport, and then I was finishing up some Quizlets and some study guides for school. So moving away from the hot and nots, we're going to stay adjacent, or really, we're going to stay with the dental school topic. And I thought, since we're really now in the time of students applying to dental school, I believe the application opened back in May, and people, I guess, are now hitting enter to, submit their applications. So I thought I would take this portion of the podcast and talk about things that I wish I knew during applying to dental school. And I know it's kind of late because people are kind of in the midst of it, but again, I didn't submit my application until July 1st because July 1st was when I took the DAT. So I wasn't one of the really early ones, although I had most of my application filled out. But so anyway, these are the top 3 things that I wish I knew before applying to dental school. And these are not listed based on importance, they're just listed in numerical order. So number 1, one of the things I wish I knew before applying to dental school was the amount of time it was going to take for me to prepare and take the DAT. I made a post about this on Instagram way back when I was in the midst of taking this, but basically I had first gotten DAT Bootcamp, which is the program that I use to take the DAT, and I think I have a code with them, so if you know anybody who is in the midst of preparing to take the DAT, or, planning on taking the DAT yourself, I believe my code is Teeth and Crowns. I don't know if it's still active. I have unfortunately not done a lot of promoting DAT Bootcamp. If DAT Bootcamp took away my code, I would not blame them for that, but you might as well try it. Anyway, I first got DAT Bootcamp, I think the fall semester before I planned on taking it, because I was like, I'm such a good student, I'm going to start studying this during my fall semester. Wrong. Some people can do that. I was not one of them. I was the type of student that was very into the work that I was doing, so that left very little time to study for the DAT during when I had school. So I didn't actually start studying the DAT until the summer of when I was planning on taking it. So this would have been the summer before I started my senior year of undergrad. So the beginning or the end of my spring semester of junior year, I renewed my DAT Bootcamp subscription and started seriously studying for it. At that point, I was also trying to finish up my 100 hours of shadowing. So for the first half of the summer, I was doing 4 hours of shadowing in the morning, and then I would study the DAT the rest of the day. Once I hit the 100 hours of shadowing, though, I did stop shadowing at that point just to fully commit to studying for the DAT. And my days of studying for the DAT would be like 8 to 11, I would study, take an hour-long lunch break, and then study from 1 to 4, and then have a dinner break, and then do, not really studying, but more summarizing the notes of the day, after dinner. And since I was a commuter, I did this all at my undergrad. I would drive to my undergrad and just, sit in a empty lab room and study the DAT. And I was generally unbothered. So I think I ended up studying for the DAT from the beginning of May, until July 1st when I took the DAT, and I basically was doing it 7 days a week. I don't remember what the schedule looks like or if they changed the schedule, and if they have a break day in it, they might have. But I don't think I took that. I honestly can't remember. I would not be surprised if I did not take the break day and just did like a shortened work day, but I think I did the schedule where it was like a pretty short studying period. So if you're keeping track, that's about 2 months, I think, for studying the DAT. Some people can do that, and more power to you. But me, personally, I would have liked some more time to study it. Maybe I would have submitted my application earlier and then just waited to send in my DAT score after. But for me, I think I needed longer than 2 months to study for it. And also, I was very burnt out from my junior year of undergrad. It was a very lab heavy year, and you know how junior year goes for a STEM major. So I was very burnt out. I think I ended my junior year on a Wednesday, and I took the rest of that week off, and then the Monday after that, I went right into DAT studying. So in hindsight, I would have taken more time to rest after a year of school, and then I probably would have studied for the DAT longer. But I didn't do that. I took it July 1st, and then I submitted my application. And you might be asking, why didn't I submit it and then, submit the DAT score? But for me, I didn't want to waste all that money applying for dental school if I didn't have what I thought was to be a good DAT score, and then go through all the trouble of wasting all that money for nothing. And remember, back in my day, 2 years ago, back in my day, the DAT scores came out that day. Like, you took the test, you pressed enter, and your score came up. I know DAT has changed their scoring criteria. I know it's like a 3-digit number now instead of a 2-digit number, and now you have to wait a couple of weeks because of that. But for me, I thankfully got mine the day of. So after I took the test, I got my grade, or I got my score, and I determined, like, okay, that's a good enough score for me to submit my application. So yeah, that's the first lesson that I wish I would have known before applying to dental school. I personally vastly underestimated how much time it would take to study for the DAT, so I definitely wish I had more time. The second thing I wish I knew before applying to dental school is how expensive it was. The subscription for DAT Bootcamp, even though you can find many codes elsewhere through other students, it is definitely something that you need to account for that price. And for me, because I had to renew my subscription, that cost even more. I do have to say though that my subscription for DAT Bootcamp the second time around was gonna expire a week before my test date. So I was gonna be without, the DAT Bootcamp stuff for a week before my test date. And I reached out to them, and they actually extended my subscription date for a week for free. So I really appreciate that. DAT Bootcamp people are extremely supportive, and I definitely recommend that if you're going to study for the DAT Bootcamp. I plan on using the bootcamp for when I take my boards, so I just want to promote that. But it is definitely a cost, especially if you pay for the subscription twice. So that was a cost in and of itself. Also, applying to schools, every school costs a certain amount of money. So I think the first school, at least when I was applying for it, cost a certain amount of money, and then subsequent schools cost another certain amount of money. And if they have a secondary application, you might have to pay more money as well. So for me, I only applied to 4 schools. I know that is on the very low side compared to the amount of schools that people are applying to today, especially people in medical school as well. Someone talked at my school who was on a medical board of admissions, and he said he's seeing an average of like 16 schools that people applied to. And I'm sure that that number is close to the same number that it is for dental schools. The one pre-dental student that I knew in my grade, I think he had applied to 10 schools. And for me personally, I was paying for this all by myself. And this is not to shame the people who have people helping pay for their schooling or their dental school application. This is not a shame on you. Actually, I'm happy for you. But for me, I was doing it all by myself, and I just did not have the money to apply to that many schools. I actually was going to apply to 5, and I dropped the one because I just couldn't afford it. So I ended up applying to the 3 in-state schools and then 1 out-of-state. So I applied to University of Illinois at Chicago, at Midwestern University, Southern Illinois University, and then Marquette University. And then I think almost all those schools had secondary applications that also required me to put money down. So when you get accepted to a dental school, they will have you put money down as a deposit to basically hold your spot in their class, but you do usually have to put money down by a certain date in order to save your spot in a class if you've been accepted to that school. And SIU, I don't know if I talked about this, but SIU was the only school that accepted me, and so I put money down, and then it ended up being fine because I ended up going to that school. And I'm here now. This is a tangent, but a funny story about being admitted to SIU SDM is that when I got the email and opened it, it was addressed to someone who was not me. And someone actually who was not in my class as of now, so they must have forfeit their spot in the class. But, so I emailed the person back and I said, I assumed that they were talking about me that because the email said my name, but I said that the admissions packet is addressed to a different student and they apologized for that mistake and then sent me my admissions letter. So again, the second thing I wish I knew was how expensive it was going to be. Definitely budget for that. I know, and this is probably too late in the game for people who are applying this cycle, but I think there is a scholarship that you can apply for in order to help pay for some of the dental school admission costs. I don't know how much that is. I was looking into it when I was applying, but I had missed the deadline, so I don't know too much about that. But definitely look into that if you are planning on applying the next cycle. And guys, can you believe that the incoming class right now is the class of 2029 and that the class of 2030 is applying for dental school right now? Oof, that makes me feel very old. I was talking about that with my friend Emily the other day, and we both had like a visceral reaction, like, oh, that's so not disgusting, but it's just so weird that the next class, the class that is applying right now, is the class of 2030. Alright, moving on to the last thing that I wish I knew before applying to dental school, and that is just how much you're going to doubt yourself during it. I don't know if it was maybe just studying for the DAT, which it was a horrible experience for me. I don't think anyone looks at that time and is like, oh my gosh, I had so much fun studying for the DAT. I was burnt out, I was studying long hours, I was not having fun, I hated it. DAT bootcamp definitely made it easier, but it's still not a fun process. And for me, I was not breaking the scores that I wanted to when I was taking the practice test for DAT, and I just felt really discouraged because I wanted a certain score. And you know what? Why am I even saying score? I'll tell you the numbers that I wanted. I wanted a 22, and I was not breaking a 20. And for those who are taking the DAT now, this probably doesn't mean anything to you because you guys have some strange 3-digit MCAT-like scores, but when I was taking it, it was 2 digits. I think it went up to a 32. I wanted a 22, and I was not breaking 20s on any practice test I was doing, so I felt really discouraged. I think it's one of the few times that one of my sisters have seen me cry because I was just so frustrated with myself. I'm like, I've put in all this work and it's not doing anything. And I definitely think that looking back on it now, DAT Bootcamp does prepare you well because I think their tests are a lot harder than what the actual DAT is. So at that point, I was really discouraged. I'm like, maybe dentistry is not for me if I can't, pull it together and take this DAT and get the score that I want. And I didn't even get the score that I want. I got a 21. And I was honestly upset with myself after getting my score. And like I talked about before, back in my day, we got the scores right then and there. And I honestly didn't think, I thought they had given me like a sample score sheet because my reading level was a lot lower than I thought it would be. And so I didn't think it was my actual score. And then, it was my actual score. And then I was honestly very disappointed in it. And I think I had hyped up the score, the 22 that I wanted so much that when I told my dad I got a 21, he thought I had failed. Like 22 was like the cutoff. And he's like, "Oh no, she's gonna have to take it again." My mom's like, "No, that's just the score that she wanted." And honestly, 21 isn't bad. Um, so I don't know what I was freaking out about. I'm an anxious lady, probably, and that's why. But yeah, the three things that I wish I knew in summary would be that don't underestimate the time that you need to study for the DAT. If you're someone who has to start studying for exams a month out, you probably need a couple of months to start studying for the DAT. If you're someone who can cram and has like a wonderful memory and you can cram for an exam in 1 week, then maybe you need less time. I always say err on the side of needing more time to study for the DAT, so then you can take breaks. You don't have to do like 8-hour study days like I did or whatever. So, yeah. The second thing I wish I knew was how expensive it was to apply to dental school. For those people who are, applying to 10 plus schools, more power to you, but that was not me. I could not afford that. I talked about applying to a fifth school. The fifth one was gonna be the University of Michigan, but honestly, I first of all couldn't imagine living there, even though I love Michigan. That's where me and my family go to vacation. I just couldn't imagine living there, and then their tuition is very expensive. And Midwestern University, their tuition is very expensive too, but it was also like 20 minutes from my home. So I wouldn't have to spend any money on room and boards. Which is funny because I ended up being at the one of the furthest locations that I wanted to go, which was SIU. But here I am. It is kind of sad being this far from home. I don't really get to go home on weekends, which I wish I could, but it all works out in the end. And finally, the third thing I wish I knew is how much you're going to doubt yourself and, question your ability to even get into dental school. I mean, there will be definitely times where you're sitting there thinking about your application and comparing yourself to others, especially if you're on Instagram when people post like, these are the stats that got me into this many schools. And that's honestly one of the reasons why I don't make those types of posts, because for a long time I felt like I wasn't worthy to make those posts because I'm like, I only applied to 4 schools and I only got into one. So that's why I really didn't make those posts, because like I don't have the experience to be able to say like I got into like 10 plus schools and I have the most amazing stats. I had a good GPA, as good as I could get it to. I did not have research experience by the time that I had applied for it. I was doing my research seminar my last semester of my senior year, and by the time I was only going into senior year, so I did not have research under my belt. I did not have a lot of extracurricular activities. I was the vice president of events, I think my position was, for my Catholic Cardinal group at my undergrad. I had done a lot of volunteering before I got to that undergrad, but I didn't have, I wasn't the president of a club, I wasn't in sports, I didn't do interesting things, I wasn't, an author on a research paper. So I just felt like I didn't have the credibility to be able to make those posts, because I'm like, there's other people who, are presidents of clubs, athletes, student athletes. They have research under their belt that are much more qualified to make those posts on Instagram. But yeah, you're gonna doubt yourself. You're gonna hate studying for the DAT. Everyone does. But eventually, if you want something that bad, you're gonna get it. So if your dream is to become a dentist, you will become a dentist, whether or not you have to take 1 gap year, 2 gap years, or you go right into dental school. At the end of the day, if that's what you want, you're going to become a dentist. So don't fret too much about the stresses of applying to dental school. Some people will have to take gap years and have master programs under their belt, but honestly, everything that you go through is something that is going to make you a better dentist overall. So I wish everyone applying for this cycle good luck, and the class of 2030 is going to be a good one. Well, that's all for this episode. Thank you so much for watching or listening or both. As I always say, sometimes I feel like I'm talking into a void, but if there's one person in that void with me, it's all worth it. If you'd like me to answer questions either about dentistry or not at all related to dentistry, I'd be more than happy to do that. You can either DM me on Instagram or send me a carrier pigeon. That's all for now. See you in the next episode.